Greetings, dear subscribers and casual listeners of my channel. The world of Harry Potter is no longer just a book series. It's a phenomenon that unites generations. But even the greatest stories aren't free from doubt and regret, not even for their authors. J.K. Rowling, the creator of this world, has since admitted that there are certain plot points she would have done differently today. Let's revisit such moments the author herself came to regret. Enjoy the video. Number 1. Bulldogs. An unfair accusation. In The Prisoner of Azkaban, we meet Aunt Marge and her grim, fierce bulldog. The dog is portrayed as a menacing creature who chases Harry up a tree. Only later did Rowling learn that English bulldogs are in fact gentle, affectionate, and not aggressive by nature. She confessed to knowing very little about the breed and regretted creating a false impression. She even apologized to bulldog owners who may have been hurt by that depiction. Number 2. Dobby, a farewell too bitter. At the beginning of the Chamber of Secrets, Dobby was annoying, loud, clumsy, constantly getting in Harry's way. But over time, he became one of the most beloved characters, loyal, free, and devoted. He even rescued Harry and his friends from the clutches of the Malfoys. Unfortunately, the cost of that bravery was high. Bellatrix's dagger found its mark straight into Dobby's chest. It was one of the most heartbreaking scenes in the entire series. Years later, Rowling admitted that writing Dobby's death was painful, and she regretted not letting him live. Still, she acknowledged the dramatic power of the scene, made it almost impossible to cut. Number 3. Severus Snape, a hero with a tragic fate. Snape is a character who sparked intense emotions among millions of readers. His story is a journey from apparent villain to tragic hero, filled with pain and love. But like many fan favorites, Snape met his end in the final book. Rowling later apologized for his death, realizing just how important he had become to readers. Some fans still believe Snape could have survived. He was a potions master. Surely he could have had an antidote with him. What if he really did make it out alive, living somewhere in the shadows far from the magical world? Number 4. Ron and Hermione, love by force. The romantic pairings in the final books drew mixed reactions. Harry and Ginny's relationship felt natural, shy glances, inner conflict, and finally, their union. But the Ron and Hermione pairing sparked debate. Despite hints in the Goblet of Fire, their relationship seemed forced to many. After the release of Book 7, Rowling admitted she might have made a different choice. According to her, Hermione would have been better suited to Harry, mentally, intellectually, and emotionally. Emma Watson and Rupert Grint agreed. Emma openly said that Hermione and Ron weren't the perfect match, and Rupert jokingly added that he imagined Ron as divorced and living alone in a tiny apartment. Number 5. The epilogue, not the right ending. The final scene of The Deathly Hallows takes us 19 years into the future. The children of the main characters are boarding the Hogwarts Express. It's a touching and symbolic moment, and the cycle is complete. But Rowling later revealed she had envisioned a different ending. In her original draft, she wanted to show the heroes graduating and celebrating at their school's final ceremony. However, after the epic Battle of Hogwarts, such a festive scene felt out of place. The wounds were still too fresh. So instead of a graduation, we got a quiet, intimate moment at the station. Yet Rowling still apologized to those who had hoped for a different conclusion. Number 6. Fred Weasley's death. Fred Weasley was laughing when it happened. In the middle of chaos, he cracked a joke, and then the wall exploded, and Percy was shaking his brother, and Ron was kneeling beside them, and Fred's eyes stared without seeing. Just like that, gone, no last words, no time to say goodbye. One half of a duo that had been inseparable since Book 1. The Weasley twins were more than comic relief. They were light in the dark, mischief with heart, From fireworks at Hogwarts to founding Weasley's Wizard Wheezes, Fred and George stood for joy and rebellion. Killing Fred wasn't just painful, it felt personal. Readers felt like they lost a brother too. J.K. Rowling later said it was one of the hardest deaths she ever wrote. "I'm sorry," she told fans. "I really am." She explained that Fred's death was meant to show that war spares no one, that even laughter can fall silent. But she admitted, years later, that taking Fred from George still hurts her. George was never the same. The books don't say much, but the silence around him is heavy. Fans imagined him waking up alone, hearing no echo, looking at his reflection and seeing only half. Number 7, the Bathilda Bagshot scene. It started with silence. Godric's Hollow was still buried in snow. Harry and Hermione stood at the grave of his parents, hearts heavy. Then came Bathilda Bagshot, or what looked like her, frail, silent, beckoning them inside. What followed was one of the darkest scenes in the series. A trap, a corpse, a snake. Inside the house, nothing felt right. Hermione sensed it. Harry didn't. He followed Bathilda upstairs alone. She didn't speak, she only gestured. And then the snake reared out from the old woman's neck, her body collapsing like a puppet. It wasn't Bathilda, it was Nagini, in disguise. Using a corpse, Rowling called it the darkest piece of magic in the whole series. Readers called it a nightmare. In the film, the scene became even more terrifying. The body split open, the snake lunged, the music screamed. Younger viewers had to close their eyes. Parents said it was too much. Rowling later agreed. She said she may have gone too far. "I wanted to show danger, real danger, but I may have overdone it." Still, the moment worked. It shook Harry. It reminded readers that Voldemort's world had no mercy, but it came at a cost. Fear lingered. Even Rowling said, "That was the one time I truly frightened myself." Number 8. Colin Creevey's fate. He was just a kid with a camera. Colin Creevey, the boy who idolized Harry from the moment they met. In the Chamber of Secrets, he runs up beaming, snapping photos. "All those times I've seen you, I've never managed to get a picture," he says. Annoying? Yes, but honest. Brave in his own way. He believed in Harry when many didn't. When Harry was called a liar, when people turned their backs. Colin stood firm, a muggle born in a school that was growing darker by the day. He never stopped cheering for his hero. And when the final battle came, he wasn't even supposed to be there. He was underage, but he snuck back in anyway, because that's what loyalty looks like. Then he died, quietly. Off page, his body is mentioned just once. Colin Creevey, though small in death, that's all. No reaction from Harry, no whispered thank you, no tears, just a name in a list. Readers noticed. They waited for Harry to feel something, say something, but he didn't. J.K. Rowling later admitted it was a mistake, that in the chaos of the ending, some characters were left in the background. She said Colin deserved more. "He was one of the bravest," she said. And she was right. He came back when he could have run. He died fighting for what he believed in. For Harry, Colin was probably a reminder of everything he wanted to forget. The war, the death, the faces of those who followed him without question. Maybe it was too painful. Maybe the silence was part of the grief. But for fans, it felt wrong. Colin deserved more than a passing line. Number 9. Lupin and Tonks. Remus Lupin and Nymphadora Tonks were never supposed to fall in love. He was older, scarred, worn down by life. She was young, vibrant, full of colour, literally. But somehow their paths collided and something brave happened between them. Love bloomed in the middle of a war. Their story wasn't simple. Lupin tried to push her away. He believed he was cursed, too dangerous, unworthy. "In the Half-Blood Prince," Tonks cried, "the one I love is scared to love me back." But she didn't let him go. She chose him, and he finally chose her. Then came the war, and with it, sacrifice. In the Deathly Hallows, just before the Battle of Hogwarts, Tonks whispers to her mother, "I have to go. Remus is fighting." That was the last time she was seen alive. Lupin died at her side. No farewell. No final words. Only their bodies lying still in the great hall, and their baby, Teddy, left behind. J.K. Rowling later explained the choice. She wanted a full circle. Lupin and Tonks would mirror James and Lily. Two parents lost to war, a child left to carry the legacy. Rowling said, "I'm sorry, it was hard to write, but I needed to show that not everyone survives, even the good ones." Still, the loss hit hard. Fans had rooted for them. They had already suffered so much. Lupin had lived in shame. Tonks had loved fiercely. And just when they had a future, a son, it was torn away. Many readers believed they deserved better. A life after war, a quiet home, a chance to raise Teddy together. Instead, Teddy Lupin grew up like Harry, an orphan, loved but missing something vital. It was a painful echo, a reminder that even in victory there is loss. And sometimes even magic can't fix what war breaks. Number 10. No funeral for Sirius Black. Sirius Black died with no body, no grave, no final words, just a scream, just Harry's voice echoing through the halls of the Department of Mysteries, calling after him. And then silence. A man who meant everything, gone behind a curtain no one could understand. He was Harry's godfather, the closest thing to family he had left. The one who called him James by accident, the one who promised, "You can come live with me." For a moment, Harry had hope, a home, a future beyond Hogwarts. All of that vanished when Bellatrix laughed and Sirius fell through the veil. But after that, the story moved on. There was no funeral, no eulogy, no moment of Harry kneeling by a grave or holding something that belonged to him. The narrative raced forward, Dumbledore's secrets, the prophecy, the coming war. Readers were left with a hole, not just in Harry's life, but in the story itself. Rowling later said she wanted to show Harry in shock, that he didn't have time to process it fully, but fans felt robbed. "I think I should have given Sirius a real farewell," she admitted in an interview, and she was right. This was the man who escaped Azkaban for Harry, who fought beside him, who died for him. And still, he got less than a paragraph. In Half-Blood Prince there's a brief mention of Sirius's will, a line about how Grimmauld Place passed to Harry. And then it's over. Nothing about Remus Lupin mourning his oldest friend. Nothing about the Order gathering to say goodbye. Not even a moment where Harry stands alone, missing the man who gave him his first real family Christmas. Number 11. Hedwig's death. She died in mid-air. One moment she was there, screeching, claws out, feathers flying, and then gone. A flash of green light. Silence. Hedwig was gone. It happened in the very first chapter of the Deathly Hallows. Harry is being smuggled away from Privet Drive, riding with Hagrid in Sirius's flying motorbike. Death Eaters appear, spells crash through the sky. Then a second jet of green light flashed past Harry's left ear. His broom gave a sudden jerk, and he dropped Hedwig's cage. There was a loud screech and a thud, and that was it. No farewell, no last look, just a thud. For many readers, it was a gut punch. Hedwig wasn't just a pet. She was a part of Harry's soul, the first magical gift he ever received, the first creature to treat him with dignity back when the Dursleys locked him in a cupboard. She delivered letters, brought news, waited patiently in silence when no one else understood. She was freedom with feathers. Rowling later explained her decision. In an interview she said, "The loss of Hedwig represented a loss of innocence and the end of childhood." Killing her in the opening chapter was meant to signal that nothing would be the same, that Harry was crossing into something darker, something brutal, but even she couldn't let go without pain. "Yes, I killed the owl, I'm sorry." Some fans still haven't forgiven her, not because it was a cruel death, but because it felt sudden, almost careless. Hedwig didn't die saving Harry. She didn't go out in a blaze of magic. She was hit by a curse in a cage without a goodbye. After 7 years by his side, she deserved more. A moment, a word, a hand stroking her feathers one last time. Number 12. The Abandoned Story of the Marauders. Sirius Black wasn't always a fugitive. He was once the loudest boy at Hogwarts, sharp, reckless, impossible to ignore. His best friend, James Potter, charming, talented, untouchable. Beside them stood quiet, clever Remus Lupin. And tagging along, unnoticed at first, was Peter Pettigrew. Together they were the Marauders, mischief makers, rule breakers, brothers. But their full story? Still a mystery. How did they become friends? What made Sirius, heir to a pure-blood fanatical family, choose James over his own blood? In the Order of the Phoenix, Sirius says, "I hated the lot of them. My parents with their pure-blood mania." That's it. A single sentence. No scenes of rebellion. No midnight conversations. No moment where Sirius walked away from the Black family forever. Just silence where we craved fire. And the Marauders map, oh, that map. A magical artifact so brilliant it could track every soul in Hogwarts. Fred and George hand it to Harry like it's a joke. No origin, no ritual, no spark of genius. We know, thanks to Rowling outside the books, that the four friends created it. But where's the scene? Where's the night they first watched those names appear? Moony, Wormtail, Padfoot and Prongs. Oh, that should have been unforgettable. Instead, it was skipped. Then came the war, the first Wizarding War. Voldemort was rising. James and Lily joined the Order. Sirius and Remus too. Peter was already slipping away. These four boys, once unstoppable, were torn apart by betrayal, but we didn't see it. We were only told, quietly, briefly, as if it didn't deserve to be shown. Even Remus, always reserved, always alone, says to Harry, "Your mother was there for me at a time when no one else was." That's a whole story in one line. Lily standing by a boy with a curse, James defending him in secret. Number 13, the dark fate of Percy Weasley. Percy Ignatius. Weasley stood tall, shoulders straight, spectacles glinting with ambition, a boy who craved order in a world that thrived on chaos. Among the vibrant, loud and often unruly Weasleys, Percy was the anomaly. While his brothers turned beds into fireworks labs and gorged themselves on mischief, Percy memorized rules, polished prefect badges, and dreamed of writing cauldron-bottom reports for the Ministry of Magic. But beneath that polished surface lay a deep desire to matter. Not just as another red-headed Weasley, but as someone important. Someone recognized not because of his family, but in spite of it. From the very start, Percy's role within the Weasley family was quietly tragic. He was present, but detached, included, but never fully embraced. His ambition isolated him, especially when he began to prioritize his career over kinship. "It's not as if I haven't got anything to do," he once snapped to Fred and George. "I'm an important person at the Ministry now." That single sentence summarized his fatal flaw. Percy mistook titles for identity, bureaucracy for belonging. When Cornelius Fudge, the ever-blind Minister of Magic, denied Voldemort's return, Percy chose to side with him, not because he was evil, but because he couldn't bear to see the cracks in the system he revered. In his eyes, the Ministry stood for truth, and if it fell, then so did everything Percy had built his identity upon. So he turned his back on his family, moving out of the burrow and ceasing all contact. It was not cruelty that motivated him, but desperation. He couldn't face the possibility that his parents might be right and everything he believed in was a lie. Molly Weasley, broken-hearted, continued to knit him Christmas jumpers he never wore. Arthur sent letters he never answered. Fred and George mocked him mercilessly in their shop window, hanging a sign that read, "Percy Weasley, Ministry's poster boy." Ron vacillated between hurt and rage. Yet perhaps the most painful silence came from Ginny, who never understood how her own brother could walk away from the family when the world was burning. The chasm Percy left behind was not dramatic, but deep, and in the books it festered in the shadows. Rowling, in her later interviews, admitted that she wished she had given Percy's internal struggle more room to breathe. His return to the family during the Battle of Hogwarts was sudden, almost jarring. One moment he was gone. The next he was beside Fred, cracking jokes in the middle of chaos, fighting side by side with the brothers he had disowned. "Hello, Minister!" Percy shouted when he returned, and hexed pious thickness into unconsciousness. It was supposed to be a moment of triumph, redemption, but instead it felt like a narrative shortcut, because readers never got to see what led to that moment. We didn't see Percy alone in his flat, reading about the imprisonment of innocent Muggle-borns. We didn't witness his growing horror as the Ministry handed power to Death Eaters. We weren't given the scene where he stood in front of a mirror and realized he had sacrificed love for illusion. Those were the scenes Rowling later said she regretted omitting. In her own words, "I do wish I had shown more of Percy's change of heart. He deserved that moment, and so did the readers." Perhaps the most heartbreaking consequence of Percy's rushed redemption was how it undercut the death of Fred Weasley. Fred, vibrant, unbreakable, always laughing Fred, fell in the middle of a joke just after reconciling with Percy. Percy was shaking his brother, and Ron was kneeling beside them, the book reads. Fred's eyes stared without seeing, the ghost of his last laugh still etched upon his face. That single sentence shattered thousands of readers, and for Percy it was a moment that should have been the emotional anchor of the entire battle. Imagine it, Percy, who had missed birthdays, dinners, and every shared laugh, now holding his brother's lifeless body. For years he had built a wall between himself and his family, brick by bureaucratic brick. And now, in a single night, that wall crumbled, but too late. Fred was dead. There would be no more teasing, no more forgiveness, no more time. Percy's scream, described as inhuman, rang through the rubble-strewn corridors of Hogwarts. Yet the book moved on quickly, as if afraid to dwell in the rawness of that grief. We needed more. We needed a scene of Percy standing at Fred's funeral, unable to speak, his shoulders shaking. We needed a conversation between Percy and George, the surviving twin now forever incomplete. We needed to see him fall to his knees in front of Molly and Arthur and beg for forgiveness, not with words but with tears. Instead, Percy disappeared into the background, and his path to redemption became a footnote rather than a turning point. The tragedy of Percy Weasley is that he was never evil. He was never even misguided in the traditional sense. He simply chose the world he thought was stable over the world that was true, and in doing so he lost everything. When he returned, it was not to be hailed a hero, but to silently pick up the pieces of the family he had once broken. Rowling did say later that Percy eventually found peace, becoming head of the Department of Magical Transportation and rekindling his bond with his siblings. But the books end before we can witness that quiet healing. During the chaos of war, Percy's reappearance was meant to symbolize hope, the return of prodigal sons and the reuniting of broken homes. Yet even his jokes felt out of place. The Percy who had once quoted, Ministry handbooks now cracked sarcastic lines at Death Eaters. It was funny, yes, but jarring, as if he had changed overnight. Readers who had followed his arc since Book 1 found themselves torn. Happy he was back, but confused at how easily he seemed to slip into his old place. Number 14. Luna Lovegood's limited role. In the middle of a war-torn Hogwarts, beneath crumbling stone and drifting ash, a voice still spoke with calmness, with strange poetry, with unshaken belief. "We should close his eyes, don't you think?" Luna Lovegood whispered gently, kneeling by the lifeless body of Dobby the house elf. She didn't scream, she didn't sob, she simply acted as though her very presence soothed the grief-stricken silence that surrounded Harry. It is in this quiet, fleeting moment from Deathly Hallows that Luna shines not as comic relief or eccentric sidekick, but as a vital soul in Harry's journey. And yet, for all her grace, courage, and inner wisdom, the saga around Luna Lovegood remains curiously muted. Luna first appears in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, floating into the series with her radish earrings, butterbeer cork necklace, and unfocused eyes reading The Quibbler upside down. "You're just as sane as I am," she tells Harry after he stares at her with uncertainty. At first glance, Luna seems to be a walking contradiction, detached from reality, yet observant in the most painful moments, socially awkward, yet astonishingly brave. Within pages, she leaves an impression that lingers longer than most, and for many readers, she instantly became one of the most beloved characters in the series. Yet, despite her emotional intelligence, unwavering loyalty, and unique voice, Luna's arc remains sidelined as the final books unfold. After her introduction in the 5th installment, she's present, but often faintly, like a ghost in the background of a crowded photograph. Her lines are fewer, her appearances shorter. Even in the climactic events of Deathly Hallows, Luna drifts in and out, occasionally reappearing to offer cryptic wisdom or a calming presence, but rarely central to the action. And by the end, when the battle has been fought and the ashes have settled, we never truly return to her. This silence has not gone unnoticed. In fan forums, Reddit threads, and podcast discussions, a consistent question emerges: why was Luna's story never told in full? Why, when characters like Neville Longbottom or Ginny Weasley were given closing chapters and emotional payoffs, was Luna left with fragments? The injustice stings more sharply when you recall how essential Luna was to the creation of Dumbledore's army, or how she bravely endured capture and imprisonment at Malfoy Manor without losing her mind or spirit. One could argue that Luna embodies the very heart of resistance, not through loud declarations or wand-swinging heroics, but through quiet, unyielding belief. When others doubted Harry's claim that Voldemort had returned, Luna believed him without hesitation. "I believe he who must not be named is back, and I believe you fought him and escaped from him," she tells Harry in the Order of the Phoenix. Her loyalty isn't blind, it's intuitive. Her strength is not muscle or skill, but resilience, empathy, and truth. Rowling herself has acknowledged this oversight. In an interview following the release of The Cursed Child, the playwright's continuation of the Harry Potter world, Rowling admitted, "If I were writing the series again from scratch, I would give Luna more space. Her voice deserved more." A powerful confession from the author of such an intricately built universe. And yet, in The Cursed Child, Luna appears only once, and even then only by mention. She is married to Rolf Scamander, grandson of Newt, and works as a naturalist. We learn she has twin sons, Lorcan and Lysander, but the moment is brief, more like a footnote than a chapter. It's not that Luna needed to be thrust into the limelight with a wand blazing or a prophecy in hand. But the Luna we met deserved depth. We never saw her mourn her mother, though it's a defining part of her backstory. "I still feel very sad about it sometimes," she tells Harry in the Hogwarts Express carriage. "But I've still got Dad." Her pain is evident, her emotional world rich, but it's mentioned only in passing. How did she cope growing up with loss and loneliness? How did she process being bullied and excluded, her belongings stolen from her dormitory with no justice? These questions remain suspended in mid-air, unanswered. Perhaps the most glaring absence lies in the Battle of Hogwarts. While Rowling gives rich multi-page arcs to characters like Molly Weasley and even Percy, Luna's presence is oddly subdued. She helps fight, she protects others, she even stands beside Harry in the room of requirement, but her moments feel rushed. There is no grand farewell, no personal reckoning, no time granted to show how deeply she felt the losses of Fred, Tonks, Lupin, or even Colin Creevey. And that absence, for readers who saw Luna as more than comic relief, is felt like an echo that never resolves. Consider Neville Longbottom, whose arc from bumbling boy to Gryffindor hero is given full, satisfying shape. He slays Nagini, he becomes a professor, he receives his moment of glory. Luna, though equally brave, if not more so, for her willingness to speak truth to power from the beginning, is brushed aside. We never see her adult self face the world she helped save. We never know how she mourned or healed. The silence is deafening. What would it have meant to give Luna more story? Perhaps a chapter where she meets Xenophilius again after the war, this time free from the pressure of betrayal. Maybe a scene where she visits her mother's grave, letting the reader witness her closure. A dialogue with Harry, years later, reflecting not on death and loss, but on peace and purpose. These moments didn't need to be action-packed. They only needed to exist. Harry himself recognizes her worth in Deathly Hallows, though briefly. "She's great, Luna," he tells Bill and Fleur after their daring escape from Malfoy Manor. "She's tough and brave." It's one of the few times Harry openly praises someone so directly, but again, it is fleeting. Luna disappears shortly afterward, only to reappear during the final battle. Number 15, Draco Malfoy's abrupt ending. Of all the characters who walked the hallowed halls of Hogwarts, few experienced a more quietly tragic transformation than Draco Malfoy. Introduced to readers as the arrogant pure-blood boy with slicked-back hair and a disdain for anyone outside his own social caste, Draco was never intended to be a true villain. He was a shadow, an echo of what Harry could have become under different circumstances. But while Harry's journey was celebrated and detailed with rich layers, Draco's fate, arguably just as emotionally charged, was left largely in silence. From the moment he offered Harry his hand in Philosopher's Stone, only to be rejected with a snub that set the tone for their years-long rivalry, Draco seemed set up to be the foil to the Chosen One. He sneered at Hermione's blood status, tormented Neville with glee, and mocked Ron's poverty with cruel precision. He was, to all appearances, a Malfoy through and through. But beneath that silver badge of Slytherin pride and the haughty drawl, there lived a frightened boy trying desperately to live up to the expectations of a lineage soaked in arrogance and fear. By the time we reach Half-Blood Prince, the cracks in Draco's facade are unmistakable. Assigned by Voldemort to repair the cursed Vanishing Cabinet and assassinate Albus Dumbledore, Draco is no longer the smirking brat of earlier years. Instead, he's gaunt, sleepless, and haunted. As Harry follows him through the castle, watching him disappear into the room of requirement, readers glimpse something unfamiliar in Draco: vulnerability. "I have to do this," he mutters in anguish, his wand shaking as he confronts Dumbledore in the astronomy tower. "He'll kill me! He'll kill my family!" This is not the language of a villain. It is the cry of a boy lost in a war he never asked to fight. This pivotal scene changes everything. When Dumbledore, disarmed but composed, offers Draco a choice, "You are not a killer, Draco." We see just how close he is to the edge. His failure to cast the killing curse isn't weakness, it's defiance. It's a whisper of resistance buried beneath years of indoctrination. It's the first moment Draco chooses to hesitate, and in that hesitation lies the possibility of redemption. But redemption never fully comes. In Deathly Hallows, Draco's presence is muted. He is dragged along in the chaos of the Malfoy household's reluctant loyalty to Voldemort. During the unforgettable scene at Malfoy Manor, when Hermione is tortured and Harry, Ron, and Luna are prisoners, Draco is asked to identify Harry. He hesitates again. "I can't be sure," he says, though it's clear he recognizes him. That single sentence, muted, almost whispered, is another choice, another step away from darkness. It saves Harry's life, in its own small way. Later in the Battle of Hogwarts, Draco is once more a ghost in the background. His most telling moment comes not on the battlefield, but in the Room of Requirement, chasing after the lost diadem of Ravenclaw. He does not join Voldemort's army. He does not duel with Harry. Instead, he is caught in a burning room, nearly dying alongside Crabbe and Goyle. And it is Harry, his lifelong rival, who risks everything to save him. This moment, when Harry pulls Draco out of the inferno, is the climax of their long and bitter enmity. It is unspoken, but powerful. Yet what could have followed, a scene of acknowledgement, a thank you, a moment of reckoning, never comes. In the epilogue, 19 years later, Draco stands on platform 934 with his wife and son. His features are older, more lined, but he remains silent. When he locks eyes with Harry across the platform, there is no nod, no smile, no spoken word. The most Rowling offers is a line. Draco gave a curt nod to the trio. That's it. A nod after everything. Why? Why was Draco's story, so ripe with conflict and the potential for redemption, left unfinished? Why was there no scene where he speaks to Harry, no dialogue where he reflects on his actions or expresses regret? Why did the boy who broke down in front of Dumbledore, who couldn't bring himself to kill, who was rescued from fire by the boy he despised, never get to utter the words that could have rewritten his story? The truth is, Draco was never evil. He was a boy born into a legacy of fear and hatred, trying to find his place. Lucius Malfoy was a man obsessed with status and self-preservation. Narcissa, while loving in her own way, was bound by tradition. Draco was the product of that world, and it wasn't until Voldemort's reign entered his home that he began to understand just how dangerous loyalty to the wrong cause could be. It is telling that Narcissa, not Draco, ultimately saves Harry's life. But the act, lying to Voldemort about Harry being dead, resonates. It shows that even within the Malfoy family, love can overcome ideology. Draco's own acts of resistance are quieter, less heroic, but no less significant. In interviews after the final book, Rowling acknowledged that she could have done more with Draco. She admitted that many fans expected, even hoped, for a deeper exploration of his redemption. But in the whirlwind of closing arcs and wrapping up the fates of central characters, Draco was pushed to the sidelines. "There was more I could have done," she once said. "But I think sometimes the silence speaks for itself." Still, for readers who connected with Draco, not as a villain, but as a symbol of complexity, the silence felt more like absence. We longed for a scene in the Great Hall after the battle, where Draco, dazed and wounded, approaches Harry with trembling lips and says, "I was wrong." We imagined Harry, bruised and weary, offering his hand at last. We dreamed of a future where Scorpius and Albus would grow up untainted by the mistakes of their fathers, two boys, from two houses, no longer enemies. Number 16, The Disappearance of Cho Chang. Of all the characters who flickered in and out of Harry Potter's turbulent journey, few had such a fleeting yet emotionally charged presence as Cho Chang. Introduced in The Prisoner of Azkaban merely by name during a Quidditch match, she quickly grew into something far more significant, a symbol of Harry's adolescence, his first pangs of romance, and ultimately one of his deepest heartbreaks. But for all the weight she carried in his coming-of-age arc, Cho was quietly pushed aside, her story left unresolved, her pain largely forgotten. It is a disappearance that left many readers questioning why. In The Goblet of Fire, Cho Chang stepped into the light. Beautiful, popular, and a skilled seeker for Ravenclaw, she wasn't just a background figure anymore. She became the embodiment of Harry's teenage nervousness. When he finally gathered the courage to ask her to the Yule Ball, his stammering, anxious approach revealed how different this moment was from anything he had faced before. Not a dark wizard, but the possibility of rejection. Cho, I wondered, would you like to go to the ball with me? Goblet of Fire, Chapter 22. Her gentle refusal, "I'm sorry, but somebody's already asked me," was no less crushing for its kindness. It was the first time readers saw Harry not as the boy who lived, but as a boy simply trying to navigate emotions. Then came Order of the Phoenix, where Cho's storyline deepened, darkened, and humanized. After the death of Cedric Diggory, her boyfriend, and the Hogwarts champion murdered in cold blood by Voldemort, Cho re-entered the story as a girl swimming through grief. Her romance with Harry was born not of joy but shared pain. Their first kiss in the Room of Requirement wasn't triumphant, it was soaked in tears. "Well, she was crying," Harry said heavily. "She wouldn't stop crying. I didn't know what to do." Order of the Phoenix, Chapter 21. That moment marked one of the most realistic depictions of teenage confusion in the entire series. Two young people, both carrying trauma, stumbled into something neither fully understood, and yet that fragile, raw connection was swiftly discarded. Cho became distant, then antagonistic. The misunderstanding over Marietta Edgecombe's betrayal of Dumbledore's army caused an irreparable rift, and Cho was gone, just like that. Harry moved on, the narrative moved on, but Cho's pain, her perspective, remained largely unspoken. There was no exploration of how she coped with Cedric's death after the fallout with Harry. Her loyalty to her friend, her motivations, her recovery, they were brushed aside. What makes her vanishing act even more striking is how deeply entangled she was in some of the story's most emotional moments. Cedric's murder wasn't just a plot device, it was the emotional climax of the Goblet of Fire. The moment Voldemort's return became undeniable. Cho, as Cedric's girlfriend, stood as a living monument to that loss. Her grief was not just personal, it mirrored the trauma of an entire generation watching their world collapse. And yet, while others, like Neville Longbottom, who also suffered great personal loss, were allowed space to grow and evolve, Cho was silenced. In an interview years later, J.K. Rowling admitted, "I too quickly wrote her out of the story." That admission, while appreciated, came too late for many fans who saw in Cho the potential for a truly nuanced character arc. Imagine for a moment a Cho who rose above her grief, who transformed from a heartbroken teenager into a fierce, determined witch who fought back in the Second Wizarding War. Instead, what we got was a character who, in Deathly Hallows, appears only briefly, almost like a memory. During the Battle of Hogwarts, as chaos erupts and students rush to defend the castle, Cho is seen for a fleeting second. "I'll go and get Cho," said Ginny. "She can tell you where the diadem is." Deathly Hallows, Chapter 29. That's it, one line, no reflection on her growth, her thoughts, or her courage. She isn't even allowed to help. Ginny cuts her off with, "No, Luna will go with you, Harry." The narrative sidelines her with finality. A girl who once kissed the protagonist, who cried for a murdered classmate, who was at the emotional heart of an entire book, is relegated to the shadows. Part of the issue may lie in how Cho was written. For many readers, she was reduced to a stereotype: the weepy girlfriend, the clingy love interest, the pretty girl who didn't fit into the main trio's rhythm. But this is an unfair lens. Cho was dealing with trauma, just like Harry. Her emotional vulnerability wasn't weakness, it was realism. Her tears after kissing Harry weren't manipulation, they were grief. And in a story that so often highlighted the courage to feel, to mourn, to love despite pain, Cho should have been celebrated, not minimized. Compare this to how Ginny Weasley's character was developed. She, too, suffered trauma, being possessed by Tom Riddle, nearly killed. But Ginny's narrative was allowed to blossom. She was given agency, moments of strength, humor, and fire. She became a star Quidditch player, a member of Dumbledore's army, and eventually Harry's partner. The contrast between Ginny's rise and Cho's fade-out is stark. One girl became a heroine, the other became a footnote. It's not that Cho needed to become Harry's great love, that was never a necessity. But she deserved a complete story. Even Lavender Brown, often dismissed as comic relief, had a more visible arc: her love for Ron, her jealousy, her fear, and ultimately her tragic death in the Battle of Hogwarts. Cho's narrative, by contrast, ends not with a bang, but a whisper. We never see her fight, we never hear her thoughts. She becomes invisible in a story she helped shape. The lack of closure is what stings the most. When the dust settles and Hogwarts stands again, readers are left wondering, what happened to Cho? Did she graduate? Did she become a healer, an aura, a teacher? Did she ever forgive Harry? Did she find love again? These are the questions the narrative never answers. In a world so richly detailed, where even minor characters like Dean Thomas get backstories, Cho's silence is deafening. And it's not just fans who noticed. Katie Leung, the actress who portrayed Cho in the films, once remarked on how limited her role felt. In interviews, she reflected on the pressure of being the first non-white character with a major romantic subplot, and how fans' mixed reactions mirrored the lack of development she was given. Cho, the character, bore emotional weight. Cho, the narrative figure, was barely allowed to breathe. This raises deeper questions about how female characters are treated in literature, especially those who are not part of the main trio. Hermione was brilliantly complex, but others, Parvati Patil, Susan Bones, even Tonks to an extent, suffered from flat representation. Cho's reduction to the girl who cried too much is a reminder of how female grief, especially when it isn't stoic, is too often dismissed. The Harry Potter series gave us so much bravery, love, loss, redemption. But it also gave us gaps, spaces where characters like Cho could have flourished, but were instead erased. In the tapestry of Hogwarts, Cho's thread was colourful, delicate, and emotionally resonant. Cutting it so abruptly frayed the fabric of the story. She was more than a love interest. She was a reminder that healing is messy, that strength can look like tears, and that not every hero casts a powerful spell. Perhaps had Rowling allowed Cho to join the final battle more meaningfully, fighting beside Luna and Ginny, casting protective charms, defying the Death Eaters, we would remember her differently. Not as the girl who wept, but as the girl who rose. It's in the quiet moments of rereading that Cho's absence is most felt. When Dumbledore's army reunites, when Fred dies, when Hogwarts crumbles and then rises again, she is missing. Her presence, once so tender and poignant, has been swallowed by the urgency of plot. Yet in fan fiction, in fan art, in reader memory, Cho lives on. Many have reimagined her as a warrior, a survivor, a mentor to younger witches and wizards. Some write of her returning to Ravenclaw Tower and creating support groups for those mourning losses. Others picture her traveling the world, seeking meaning beyond magic. These aren't just fantasies, they're repairs. They're the stories we tell to fill the void. The Harry Potter series asks us to remember the fallen, to honour the overlooked. So let us remember Cho Chang, not as a sideline character, not as an emotional foil, but as a symbol of the story's forgotten heart. Her love was real, her tears were justified. Her silence was not her choice, it was the story's, and that, more than anything, is why she deserves to be heard. Number 17, lack of equal focus on all houses. From the moment Harry Potter sets foot in Hogwarts, readers are drawn into a world shaped by house pride and rivalry. The Sorting Hat song speaks of 4 houses, each with unique virtues and values. Yet as the series unfolds, one truth becomes glaringly clear. Gryffindor is the heart of the story, Slytherin is the shadow, and the other 2 houses, Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff, drift like ghosts in the margins. The Gryffindor common room, its scarlet tapestries and crackling fireplaces, becomes a second home to readers. It is where laughter rings, secrets are shared, and courage is born. With characters like Hermione, Ron, and Neville, Gryffindor is not just a house, it's a symbol of heroism and moral clarity. Slytherin, in contrast, is bathed in green light and suspicion. Its students are cunning, ambitious, and too often villains. Draco Malfoy sneers his way through the story, backed by Crabbe, Goyle, and the spectre of Lord Voldemort himself, once Tom Riddle of Slytherin. Meanwhile, Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff remain largely undefined. They are names whispered during the sorting ceremony, barely explored beyond a few brief scenes and supporting roles. Cho Chang of Ravenclaw is known not for her intellect, but for her romance with Cedric and later Harry. And Cedric Diggory, noble Hufflepuff, dies a tragic death that overshadows the house he came from. When Luna Lovegood appears, she is a breath of Ravenclaw's eccentric brilliance. Yet even she is often sidelined, her insight dismissed as whimsical oddity. Rowling herself admitted this imbalance. "I should have done more with the other houses," she once confessed. Especially Hufflepuff, I didn't realize how much readers would identify with their houses. Her apology, "Sorry, Hufflepuff," came too late for some fans who had long felt like the overlooked siblings in a family dominated by Gryffindor's golden children. The result was a kind of house hierarchy that bled from the books into real life. Children who proudly proclaimed themselves Ravenclaws or Hufflepuffs were often met with teasing. "Oh, you're the leftovers," some joked. "The ones who didn't fit anywhere else." It wasn't just fiction. It shaped identities. And yet, within the world Rowling created, there were gems of character and virtue in those overlooked houses waiting to be polished and presented. Consider the Sorting Hat's own description of Hufflepuff in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. "You might belong in Hufflepuff, and where they are just and loyal, those patient Hufflepuffs are true and unafraid of toil." These are not traits to dismiss. They are the backbone of quiet strength. Cedric Diggory exemplified this. He was fair, kind, hard-working, and courageous. So much so that Dumbledore, during his funeral, called him a boy who was kind and brave and true to the very end. Yet Cedric's death is remembered more for its narrative function than for what it says about Hufflepuff. He dies not as a Hufflepuff hero, but as a tragic plot device to ignite Harry's war with Voldemort. Hufflepuff's chance to shine is buried with him. And what of Ravenclaw? Known for wit and wisdom, the house is curiously absent from most of Hogwarts' great moments. Its founder, Rowena Ravenclaw, left behind a diadem said to enhance the wisdom of its wearer. This relic becomes a Horcrux, a vessel of dark magic, but the house it belongs to is rarely consulted, involved, or even mentioned during its recovery. It is Harry who seeks it, guided by Luna and the ghost of the Grey Lady, not by any Ravenclaw-led initiative. One of the most poignant illustrations of this imbalance comes during the Battle of Hogwarts. In Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, when Professor McGonagall asks the heads of houses to prepare their students, it is Phileas Flitwick, Ravenclaw, and Pomona Sprout, Hufflepuff, who step forward with unwavering courage. "I can act from here," says Flitwick, wand raised. Sprout answers with practical defiance, readying her plants for war, and yet their actions are quickly overshadowed by the drama of Harry, Snape, and the trio. Even in their finest moment, the other houses are relegated to the background. The core of the issue lies in narrative proximity. Readers live through Harry, who is Gryffindor through and through. His dorm mates, classes, and rivals shape the lens through which we view the school. The house tables in the Great Hall might be equidistant, but the narrative weight is not. Even Peeves, the poltergeist, the ghosts, and the teachers seem to favour Gryffindor or loathe Slytherin. Where is the Hufflepuff ghost? The fat friar appears only as a passing figure. The house colours, mascots, and values are mentioned, but rarely explored in depth. In the Goblet of Fire, during the Triwizard Tournament, we see flickers of potential. Cedric represents Hogwarts alongside Harry. The two are meant to be equals, yet even this becomes a story of Harry's resilience rather than Cedric's achievement. When Cedric dies, it is Harry's grief that takes centre stage, not the house that raised a hero. Hufflepuff is left with a void. The fandom noticed. For years, Hufflepuff was treated as a joke. The house for those who didn't belong elsewhere. Memes proliferated, painting Hufflepuffs as soft, boring, or irrelevant. Yet real Hufflepuffs and those who felt kinship with the house began to reclaim it. They pointed out that loyalty, fairness, and kindness are not lesser virtues, they are rarer and often harder to maintain in a world that rewards ambition or bravery. Rowling's universe offered a platform for these traits, but too rarely did it raise them up. Even Ravenclaw, a house of intellectual curiosity, was narrowly defined. Cho Chang is given little agency beyond her relationship drama. Luna Lovegood, though beloved, is more caricature than character for much of the series. We never meet a Ravenclaw who truly embodies the studious mastery the house is known for. Where are the inventors, the philosophers, the spell theorists? Surely they existed in a school of magic. The architecture of Hogwarts itself reflects this imbalance. The Gryffindor common room is described in loving detail. A cosy, round room full of squashy armchairs, a roaring fire, and walls hung with scarlet tapestry. The Slytherin common room, though sinister, is at least vivid, a green-lit chamber beneath the lake with skull motifs and gothic ambience. Ravenclaw's is glimpsed once, a circular room behind a bronze eagle knocker offering riddles to enter. Hufflepuff's? We barely see it. In the Deathly Hallows it is finely described, near the kitchens, with earthy tones and low ceilings. But this glimpse comes after 6 books of near invisibility. Why does this matter? Because Hogwarts is more than a setting. It is an ecosystem of identity. Children reading the books often feel a deep connection to the house they're sorted into, whether in their imagination or on fan sites. Being a Hufflepuff or Ravenclaw isn't just a trivia result, It's a piece of identity. When that identity is neglected, it sends a message, even if unintentionally. It also distorts the school itself. In reality, a healthy school balances its cultures. If Slytherins are all antagonists and Gryffindors all heroes, what does that say about education, mentorship, and bias? Are house values inherent or nurtured? Are Slytherins bad because they're born that way, or because the story gives them no other path? Interestingly, The Cursed Child, the stage sequel, attempts to rebalance this. Scorpius Malfoy, a Slytherin, is the heart of the story, kind, awkward, loyal. And Albus Potter, Harry's own son, is sorted into Slytherin. You can be a good person in Slytherin, says Scorpius, echoing what fans have said for years, but it feels like a late correction to a long-standing imbalance. Some fans have taken the reins themselves. Fan fiction, fan art, and role-playing communities have breathed life into the other houses. They have written stories about Hufflepuff auras, Ravenclaw inventors, Slytherin healers. They have imagined a Hogwarts where each house is a cornerstone, not a footnote. And yet, one wonders what might have been. What if one of the main trio had been from Ravenclaw or Hufflepuff? What if Luna had joined the trio earlier? What if Ernie Macmillan or Susan Bones had been given arcs beyond their few lines? Imagine a subplot where a Hufflepuff saves the day, not with a wand, but with compassion. It is not too late for the world of Harry Potter to grow in this direction. Television adaptations, future spin-offs, and new stories can reshape the house dynamics. They can show that bravery is not the only path to greatness, and that ambition, intellect, and loyalty deserve their own epic tales. Because in the end, Hogwarts was built on 4 pillars, and a castle standing on only 2 cannot hold forever. Number 18. Peter Pettigrew's death. When the silver hand closed around his own wrist, for a brief, flickering second, Peter Pettigrew remembered who he had once been. It happened in the dungeons of Malfoy Manor, in the shadows of stone and magic, beneath the screams of tortured prisoners. A coward faced the boy he had once betrayed. Harry Potter, bound and desperate, looked up at the trembling figure before him and spoke, not with hatred, but with a name. "You owe me, Wormtail," Harry said, the green of his eyes not unlike those of James Potter. "You saved my life once. I saved yours. Don't forget it." And in that moment, Pettigrew's silver hand hesitated. The reader barely has time to absorb what follows. With a sudden, unnatural twitch, the enchanted hand, a gift from Voldemort, betrays its owner. The silver fingers slackened. Rowling writes in The Deathly Hallows, Peter Pettigrew was dead, just like that. A life snuffed out in half a page. No monologue, no redemption, no tears, only a gasp and silence. It was an astonishingly fast end for a character whose actions changed the course of wizarding history. Peter Pettigrew, once one of the Marauders, once a friend to James and Lily Potter, was also the reason they died. It was he who revealed their hiding place to Voldemort. He who stood in the shadows of Godric's Hollow and watched a baby become an orphan. He who fled like a rat. He spent the next 13 years hiding, a silent spy, curled beneath the floorboards of the Weasley family home, masquerading as Scabbers. He listened to bedtime stories, birthday conversations, secrets of a family that loved unconditionally, all while carrying the weight of a murder he never confessed. When Sirius Black escaped Azkaban, it wasn't to kill Harry, it was to kill Peter. "You should have died," Sirius roared in, the prisoner of Azkaban. "Died, rather than betray your friends, as we would have done for you." But Pettigrew did not die. He transformed. He ran. And in doing so, he lived just long enough to resurrect the Dark Lord. That moment in the graveyard, the Goblet of Fire, chapter 32, is perhaps his most chilling. With trembling hands and whispers of ancient magic, he mixes blood, bone, and flesh. The blood of Harry, the bone of the father, the flesh of the servant, and Voldemort rises. This was Peter Pettigrew's doing. This was his legacy. And yet Rowling gave him a chance, a tiny sliver of humanity barely visible beneath the grime of fear and betrayal. When Harry reminds him of the life debt, something flickers in Wormtail's eyes, something ancient and buried. Perhaps it was the voice of Remus Lupin in his youth, calling him Wormy as they sat by the fire at Hogwarts. Perhaps it was the laughter of Sirius, throwing him a joke, ruffling his hair. Perhaps it was James, who never doubted him. Those ghosts would have haunted him every night. So why does the moment pass so quickly? Rowling herself once admitted in an interview, "I regret not exploring Wormtail's death further. I wish I'd given him a longer moment. He deserved that ambiguity." Ambiguity, such a rare word in a story filled with bright lines of good and evil. But Pettigrew was ambiguity made flesh. He wasn't brave like James, or clever like Remus, or daring like Sirius. He was scared, and in fear he betrayed. But isn't fear also human? When he hesitates in the dungeons, he shows something few Death Eaters ever did: remorse. Not defiance, not courage, just a blink of regret. And in response, the magical hand Voldemort gave him chokes the life out of him. There's a cruel poetry to that. The man who gave up his hand to bring back the Dark Lord loses his life to that very same hand. The servant who gave too much, the betrayer who was also betrayed. We must ask, what if Rowling had given him more? Imagine for a moment that he fell to his knees, crying, "I'm sorry, James, I'm sorry, Lily." Imagine he refused to kill Harry. Imagine he turned his wand and shouted, "Expelliarmus," at Bellatrix just once, before being struck down. Would we still hate him? Snape, too, was a traitor once. He joined the Death Eaters. He gave Voldemort the prophecy. But he was allowed redemption carved out in bitter memories and secret loyalties. Snape died holding Lily's name in his breath, and the readers mourned him, but no one mourns Peter. Sirius called him a rat. Harry called him a coward. Even Voldemort, his supposed master, referred to him with contempt. "Wormtail," he hissed, "you have never been worth much." And yet Wormtail was the reason Voldemort came back. His loyalty, if it could be called that, reshaped the wizarding world. His actions triggered the Second Wizarding War. His hands, real and silver, were soaked in history. What if that moment in the dungeon had lasted longer? What if Rowling had described his thoughts, the tremble of his lip, the flicker of memory? What if he had whispered, "I never wanted this"? What if Harry had seen in his eyes not hatred, but the hollow ache of a man who made the wrong choice and never forgave himself? What if Voldemort had watched from the shadows and smiled as the hand tightened? But we get none of that. The silver fingers slackened, and he falls. Even the others barely react. Harry and Ron move on. The narrative surges forward, and yet isn't this the very moment where the story could have paused? The tale of a boy who followed friends he idolized, never quite fitting in, a young wizard who found his strength not in power, but in survival. Peter was never meant to be brave, but perhaps he was meant to be sorry. Perhaps Rowling feared making him too sympathetic. After all, he did cause the death of James and Lily. He did frame Sirius. He did deliver Bertha Jorkins to Voldemort. The list of sins is long. But in a story where redemption is sacred, why not him? Even Draco Malfoy, whose wand was used to kill Dumbledore, was given forgiveness. Even Creature, the elf who despised Muggleborns, became a hero in the final hour. But Peter? Peter was silenced, like a mistake hastily erased. He had a choice, Dumbledore once told Harry. Well, we all have choices. But perhaps the real tragedy of Pettigrew was that when he truly chose to spare Harry, he wasn't allowed to live with it. His death was immediate. his redemption incomplete. And the readers, breathless, blinked and turned the page. It was over. No body buried, no gravestone marked, just a line in a chapter and a sigh in the dark. But we remember him, not fondly, not kindly, but curiously. He remains the question mark in a saga of exclamation points. What if the coward had become the martyr? What if the boy called Wormtail had found the courage of the lion he once wore on his chest at Hogwarts? What if he hadn't died? And even now, years later, some readers return to that moment, wondering. Not because they loved him, but because they saw something real. They saw fear. They saw regret. They saw the smallest ember of good in a man who had known only fire. And for that flicker, that breath of humanity, perhaps Peter Pettigrew should be remembered, not forgiven, but remembered. Number 19, ignoring the Muggle perspective. From the moment we meet Harry Potter, the Muggle world is all he knows. The cupboard under the stairs at number 4, Privet Drive, becomes the first stage on which the saga unfolds. It is here, among the televisions, drills, and roast beef dinners of Vernon and Petunia Dursley, that the magical world slips through the letterbox and shatters normalcy. Muggles are not merely bystanders at this point. They are the first line of contact with the reader, the bridge between reality and the incredible. And yet, as the darkness of Voldemort's return swells, that bridge vanishes, quietly, almost suspiciously. Throughout Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, we are grounded in Muggle existence. We know about Harry's boring uniform, the local school bully Piers Polkiss, and Mrs. Figg's stale cats and cabbage lifestyle. The contrast between the dreary Muggle world and the dazzling wizarding realm is sharp and intentional, but what begins as a clever literary juxtaposition eventually turns into an omission. By the time Voldemort regains power, Muggles seem to dissolve from the story almost entirely. We are told, not shown, that Voldemort hates Muggles. The Dark Lord does not value their lives, says Severus Snape coldly, as he discusses the use of Muggle casualties in strategic diversions, Half-Blood Prince. But the cost of Voldemort's terror to the non-magical world is barely mentioned. The London of the last 3 books remains oddly untouched. There are no Muggle newspapers screaming about disappearances, no public fear, no military alerts, nothing. In Goblet of Fire, we are introduced to a chilling scene, the Quidditch World Cup, where Muggle campsite owners are tortured by Death Eaters for sport. The poor bloke's been dangling upside down all night, Arthur Weasley says grimly. This moment is meant to shock us, to show that Muggles are vulnerable, but it is also the last time we see such clear Muggle victimhood acknowledged. As Voldemort's grip tightens, the story turns almost entirely inward, focused on Hogwarts, on Harry, on the Order of the Phoenix. The wider world, especially the Muggle world, ceases to matter. This narrative narrowing becomes most obvious in Deathly Hallows. Britain is, by all accounts, under magical siege. The Ministry has fallen. Gringotts is compromised. People are disappearing. And yet outside of the wizarding enclaves, Muggle London remains curiously unaffected. The underground doesn't shut down. There are no blackouts, no increased police presence, no mention of prime ministerial emergency broadcasts. We are given one brief scene with the Muggle Prime Minister in Half-Blood Prince, a darkly comic interlude that offers a glimpse into how wizards treat non-magical leaders. Cornelius Fudge appears in the Prime Minister's fireplace, brushing off Muggle concerns with wizardly arrogance. "You're not obliged to do anything. You're not expected to understand," Fudge tells him. The Prime Minister stands helpless, watching his world unravel from forces he can neither see nor fight. But after that single chapter, he is forgotten, his fate left unspoken, as though his role was merely decorative. And what of the millions of ordinary Muggles who live in cities where battles are fought in secret? Diagon Alley, lies hidden in the heart of London. The Department of Mysteries exists somewhere beneath Whitehall. When Death Eaters infiltrate the Ministry, does no one in Parliament notice strange goings-on? Do no Muggle employees at King's Cross hear the explosions or see the children running through brick walls? We are told by Arthur Weasley that some Muggles have been killed in the chaos. Several Muggles have been killed, he says with grim concern, in Order of the Phoenix. But the moment passes quickly. The names of these Muggles are never given. Their stories are not told. No grieving families, no funerals, no moments of silence. They are ghosts even before they die. The most haunting absence of all is in the final battle. As Voldemort's forces march toward Hogwarts, the school becomes a fortress. Enchantments are placed, shields are raised, and ghosts of the castle stand guard. But outside that enchanted wall, what is happening in the Muggle world? Is there panic in Hogsmeade Village? Do nearby Muggle towns see lightning in the sky and wonder if war has come again? Are hospitals filling with strange injuries that doctors can't explain? We know that Dudley Dursley matures enough to shake Harry's hand and whisper, "I don't think you're a waste of space," before they part ways. But what happens to the Dursleys during Voldemort's final rise? They are whisked away into protective custody, we're told, hidden by the Order of the Phoenix. But the details are sparse. How did Petunia react? Did she grieve for her sister finally? Did Vernon sit up at night, wondering if the world had gone mad? What did Dudley dream about in those days of hiding? In an interview, J.K. Rowling herself admitted regret. "Everything was too centered on Hogwarts. I do wish I had shown more of how the magical war affected the Muggle world." It is a rare moment of authorial honesty, a recognition that the stakes of the final conflict were grander than the story allowed them to be. Consider the potential of a single scene, a Muggle mother searching for her missing child, only to discover an aura disguised as a policeman, covering up traces of magical foul play. A frightened nurse at St. Thomas's Hospital trying to treat a patient who has been hit by a spell that turns skin to glass, or even a BBC broadcast interrupted by strange interference, just once, suggesting that the war beyond the veil is bleeding through. But none of this exists in canon. The story never dares open the curtain. It's not that Rowling forgot about Muggles entirely. Characters like Hermione Granger, Dean Thomas, and even Tom Riddle himself come from Muggle backgrounds. But once the battle lines are drawn, these roots are severed. Hermione never once tries to contact her parents during the final war. We are told that she modified their memories and sent them to Australia, but we are never shown how that decision breaks her. Does she cry at night, staring at a picture of her mum? Does she try to undo the spell just once to hear their voices again? Dean Thomas disappears from the narrative during the final books, rumoured to be on the run. His Muggle family is mentioned briefly, but again, they are not revisited. No scenes of his father pacing the living room, watching the evening news, wondering if his son is alive. No letters, no grief, silence. The tragedy of the story's silence is that it flattens the stakes. Voldemort becomes a villain who threatens wizards only. But his hatred runs deeper than that. Muggles are filth, he says, echoing Grindelwald's dream of domination. And yet, if that hatred is not shown with consequence, it remains abstract. One of the most emotionally gripping deaths in the series is that of Charity Burbage, the Muggle Studies professor. She is tortured and killed for teaching that Muggles are not inferior. "She would have us mate with them," Voldemort sneers, holding her suspended above the table before feeding her to Nagini, Deathly Hallows. This is a moment that should shake the reader, but even then the Muggles she championed remain invisible. No students cry for her. No Muggle parents come forward to thank her. Rowling does explore magical prejudice through the lens of blood purity. She shows us the systemic cruelty toward Muggle-borns. The Ministry becomes a fascist regime under Voldemort, forcing magical citizens to prove their lineage. But this internal oppression never spills outward. The broader Muggle world is treated as collateral at best, scenery at worst. In fan forums, the question keeps returning like a whisper in the Forbidden Forest. What about the Muggles? What did they see? What did they lose? It is a question the books never truly answer. The war ends, Voldemort falls, Hogwarts repairs itself, but outside those stone walls, who counts the dead? Imagine a scene after the war, Harry walking down a Muggle street, seeing a child chase pigeons, hearing the buzz of a radio in a nearby shop. The world continues, but something feels off. A missing poster, a burned building, a man staring at the sky, remembering the green light he thought was lightning. These echoes are missing from the story. In one of her rare nods to this absence, Rowling said, "The statute of secrecy limited what I could show." But one wonders, should secrecy trump emotion? Should world-building override world-feeling? The absence of Muggles in the final war is not merely a narrative gap, it is a missed opportunity for resonance. We are told the world is at stake, but we only ever see one side of it. The magical world and the non-magical world are connected by birth, by love, by blood. But in the final reckoning, that bond is severed. Perhaps that's the cruelest spell of all. Not Avada Kedavra, but obliviate. The erasure of lives not considered worthy of memory. The fate of the Muggles is to be forgotten. But perhaps they deserved more than that. Number 20, Alastor Moody's off-screen death. It happened in the skies. High above the clouds, amidst the chaos of spells and screams, Alastor Moody, known to most as Mad-Eye, vanished into the storm. There was no final cry, no last words, no moment of glory. One instant he was there, a grizzled veteran flying to protect a boy he believed in. The next, he was gone. Harry never saw him fall. No one did. One curse, swift and unrelenting, struck him down as he flew beside Mundungus Fletcher, who panicked and disapparated without warning. It was Fenrir Greyback, the savage werewolf, who later claimed the kill, though the truth was never confirmed. All that remained was a shattered sense of security. The greatest aura the wizarding world had known, killed off-screen, his body unrecovered, his wand never retrieved. "He's gone," said Bill Weasley, his voice low and numb. "Mad-Eye's dead." It was one of the briefest lines in the Deathly Hallows, a whisper amid the whirlwind. There was no scene of Harry mourning beside a grave, no gathering of the Order, no time to honour the man who had taught them all the meaning of vigilance. For fans, it felt like a theft, an injustice to a character who had stood like a fortress throughout the series. Mad-Eye Moody was never just another soldier in the war. He was a legend. His name carried the weight of decades of service in the Aura office. He filled entire pages of the Daily Prophet with tales of captured Death Eaters and near-death escapes. To younger witches and wizards, he was a cautionary tale, gruff, paranoid, and scarred. But to those who knew better, he was a symbol of defiance, someone who never wavered, even when everyone else had. Harry first met Mad-Eye under strange circumstances, though the man he encountered was not really Moody at all. It was Barty Crouch Jr., polyjuiced and deadly. But even impersonated Mad-Eye's essence bled through, his demand for constant vigilance, his uncompromising code of right and wrong. "You need to be prepared," Crouch's Moody said, levelling his mismatched eyes on the fourth-year students of Hogwarts. "You need to be alert. That line, spoken in a classroom, echoed louder than many shouted on the battlefield. When the real Alastor returned in Order of the Phoenix, he was exactly as formidable as the legend suggested. Constantly suspicious, always ready for attack, his magical eyes spinning in every direction, he was the hardened warrior the Order needed. He trusted few, but respected Dumbledore. And he took a particular interest in Harry, not out of sentiment, but because he saw in the boy something dangerous and worth protecting. During the operation to move Harry from Privet Drive to the Burrow, Mad Eye took the most dangerous assignment, pairing with Mundungus Fletcher. Everyone knew Dung was unreliable, a coward dressed in second-hand robes. Moody knew it too, but he took the risk anyway, perhaps because he believed he could handle anything or anyone. But war has no respect for experience. A killing curse doesn't hesitate because the target has seen more battles than most could imagine. When the mission fell apart and spells filled the sky like deadly fireworks, Harry fought for his life. George Weasley lost an ear, Hagrid barely survived, Hedwig died in her cage, but it was the announcement of Moody's death, delivered in a hushed kitchen filled with survivors, that silenced everyone. There was no time to grieve, not really. Voldemort had infiltrated the Ministry. The Order was in hiding. Death was becoming a constant companion. Even so, for a man of such stature, such weight in the narrative, the absence of a farewell felt like a wound. Rowling later admitted, "Yes, I should have given Mad Eye more space. He deserved it." But by then it was too late. The story had moved on. Some deaths in Harry Potter are spectacles. Dumbledore's is a heartbreaking orchestration atop the astronomy tower. Sirius Black vanishes behind a veil in a room full of witnesses. Fred Weasley dies with laughter still echoing in the air. But Mad Eye, he simply falls. Fans wondered why. Why give such a key figure such a small end? Some argued it was realism. War does not offer closure. Heroes die mid-sentence, unnamed on casualty lists. Others believed it was a narrative misstep, that such a towering character deserved a final moment of clarity, a last look at the boy he fought to protect. Rowling's defense was rooted in atmosphere. It was important, she said, to show that even the best could fall and fall suddenly. It was meant to unsettle. And it did. The loss of Moody shook the reader's faith in survival. If he could die so abruptly, so could anyone. But Alastor Moody was more than just a name on the fallen. He was a teacher. He mentored Tonks. He trained Kingsley Shacklebolt. He was the one who brought the toughness to the Order, the battle-scarred backbone in a group of idealists and dreamers. Without him, the Order felt different, less grounded, more vulnerable. There's a detail in Deathly Hallows that often goes unnoticed. After Moody's death, the Order never truly regains its footing. Plans falter, communication breaks down, fear spreads. Perhaps his death was more symbolic than it seemed. The steady hand was gone, and with it, the illusion that the good guys had everything under control. Even in the small remnants he left behind, Mad Eye's legacy endures. His magical eye, gruesomely displayed on Umbridge's office door at the Ministry, becomes a chilling trophy of the enemy's victory. When Harry sees it, something inside him twists. He deserves better, Harry thinks, before stealing it and giving it a quiet burial. That moment, tiny as it is, becomes Moody's only funeral. He deserved a scene. Not just because he was brave, but because he was complex. He lived a life that was never soft. He lost too many friends, trusted too few people, and carried too many scars. And yet, he never backed down. He didn't seek praise. He wasn't charming, but he was real. That's what made his sudden absence feel so sharp. One could imagine what his funeral might have looked like. A gathering in a misty glade, the remaining Order members in cloaks, each carrying a wand dipped in blue light, Tonks placing a flask of fire whiskey beside the headstone, Kingsley whispering a story from their Aura days, even McGonagall lowering her head in true silent respect. But that scene was never written. It existed only in the minds of readers who needed it. Mad-Eye Moody's role in the series, though brief in page count, was massive in emotional weight. He was the adult who never lied to Harry, never sugar-coated reality. He didn't coddle, didn't flatter, but he protected. And in the end, he gave his life not for glory, but because someone had to. The first time Harry saw him, even though it wasn't the real Mad-Eye, he was captivated. That rotating eye, that grizzled voice, that limp and battered stance. Everything about Moody screamed of a man who had lived through nightmares and chose to keep fighting. That impression stuck with Harry. It shaped his own understanding of war, of loss, of duty. In a world where loyalty is a rarity, Mad-Eye was unshakable. He never flirted with the dark arts, never questioned Dumbledore's goals, never betrayed a friend. And when Dumbledore died, Moody didn't retreat. He doubled down, recruited, planned, led, until the moment he couldn't anymore. Some say that in stories not all heroes get a spotlight, that those who give everything rarely ask for acknowledgement, but readers give it anyway. Fan forums and essays have been written, mourning the death that the books brushed past. Artwork shows him mid-battle, wands blazing. Fan fiction fills the gaps that canon left empty. His memory lives on, not because of how he died, but because of how he lived. Harry, in his own way, carries pieces of Mad-Eye with him. The need to be ready, the refusal to bow to evil, the knowledge that you can be scarred and still be strong. And maybe when Harry buried that magical eye, he wasn't just honoring a comrade, he was accepting the lesson. That courage isn't always elegant. Sometimes it's gruff and paranoid and tired, but still standing. If one listens closely beyond the pages, they might still hear his gravelly voice echoing, even in death. Constant vigilance, a mantra, a warning, a promise. And in the end, that may be the greatest tribute of all. Number 21, Professor Flitwick's background. Of all the professors who walked the enchanted halls of Hogwarts, few are as consistently overlooked yet curiously beloved as Professor Phileas Flitwick. Short in stature but towering in magical prowess, Flitwick remains a background figure in the Harry Potter series, charming, competent, but largely unexamined. This neglect, both by the narrative and perhaps unintentionally by readers, stands as one of the most bittersweet omissions in the richly layered world of J.K. Rowling. Though he teaches the essential art of charms and demonstrates unflinching bravery during the Battle of Hogwarts, Professor Flitwick never receives the depth of story afforded to his colleagues like Minerva McGonagall or Severus Snape. And yet, behind those twinkling eyes and polite demeanour lies a past that could rival any tale of heroism, magic, and sacrifice. Readers first meet Flitwick in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, where he squeaks with excitement as Harry and his classmates learn to levitate feathers using Wingardium Leviosa. He is described as so small that he must stand on a stack of books to see over his desk. One of the best teachers at Hogwarts, Ron later tells Harry in Goblet of Fire. But even with this praise, Flitwick never steps fully into the spotlight. Instead, he exists in the periphery, a warm presence, a flicker of levity, a reminder of the everyday magic that binds Hogwarts together. But what if we had looked closer? J.K. Rowling once remarked in a podcast interview, "I would have loved to write more about Professor Flitwick. He had a rich past, and I think readers would have enjoyed it. But space was limited and the story had to follow Harry." In that same discussion, she confessed to underestimating how much fans would fall in love with the kindly charms master. The regret is understandable. In a world where so many characters are painted with vibrant emotional arcs, Flitwick's story remains an unfinished sketch. And yet we do have glimpses. In Order of the Phoenix, when Dolores Umbridge begins her tyrannical inspection of Hogwarts, Flitwick is one of the few teachers who stands up to her, albeit with decorum. When she attempts to criticize his teaching methods, he politely retorts, "I'm a fully qualified wizard, thank you very much." The dignity with which he defends his classroom offers a rare window into his character, a man of patience, but not one to be belittled. He does not need to raise his wand to command respect. But perhaps the most revealing insight into Flitwick's hidden strength comes during the final battle. In Deathly Hallows, he is instrumental in fortifying the castle against Voldemort's army. Flitwick had created a huge, shimmering protean charm that sealed off the corridors, the book notes. He stands alongside McGonagall and Kingsley Shacklebolt, fighting Death Eaters and protecting students, showing no hesitation, only resolve. In that moment, Flitwick isn't just a teacher, he's a warrior, a master duelist whose wand work is spoken of in whispers. It's in Goblet of Fire where we get a brief, tantalizing nod to his dueling past. When Albus Dumbledore introduces him during the Yule Ball as a past dueling champion, most readers skim past it. But in that single phrase lies a narrative arc begging to be told. What duels had he fought? Against whom? Was he a competitor in the International Dueling League? Did he face dark wizards before joining Hogwarts? These questions remain unanswered, and yet they cling to the imagination. Rumours among fans suggest that Flitwick, part goblin on his mother's side, faced discrimination in his youth. Though not officially confirmed in the books, Rowling acknowledged his mixed heritage in interviews. Such a background would have shaped him profoundly. In a world where blood purity and prejudice still festered beneath magical society's surface, Flitwick's rise to the post of head of Ravenclaw House would have been no small feat. It speaks to a quiet tenacity, a strength of character that didn't demand attention, but quietly earned admiration. Consider the contrast between Flitwick and someone like Gilderoy Lockhart, who taught defense against the dark arts during Harry's second year. Where Lockhart was all show and no substance, Flitwick was the opposite. Humble, but overflowing with true magical knowledge. When Lockhart's memory was wiped by his own backfiring spell, Flitwick didn't gloat, didn't boast. He returned to his duties, continuing to teach levitation charms and cheering students on with a small clap of his hands. But behind that cheerful demeanour, there must have been a deep, almost painful awareness of how little the world recognized true talent. Then there's his role during Dumbledore's funeral. In Half-Blood Prince, when the elder headmaster's body is laid to rest, Flitwick is among those present. He is seen casting enchantments alongside Professors Sprout and McGonagall, shielding the casket with silvery threads of magic. It is a touching moment that hints at deep loyalty and grief. Dumbledore trusted him not just with charms, but with secrets, with responsibilities. That trust was never misplaced. And yet the films further diminished Flitwick. In the earlier movies, he is portrayed by Warwick Davis as a wizened old wizard with a long white beard and classic pointed hat. But by Prisoner of Azkaban, his appearance is completely changed. He becomes younger-looking, sleeker, still portrayed by Davis, but almost unrecognizable. Fans were left confused. Was this a continuity error? Or did the filmmakers simply not care to keep his identity consistent? It was a visual metaphor, perhaps unintentionally, for how his importance was consistently overlooked. Imagine if we had a scene, just one, in which Flitwick recounted his first duel. A younger Flitwick, trembling but determined, facing a dark wizard in a rain-soaked alley, wand clutched in a fist that barely reached his opponent's chest. He doesn't win with brute force, but with precision, intelligence, and speed. Size is no guarantee of power, he would later tell a young Ravenclaw student, echoing Yoda long before Star Wars had such lines. And he would be right. During Umbridge's reign, Flitwick subtly undermines her. He doesn't organize open rebellion like Fred and George or teach secret defense lessons like Harry, but he resists in quieter, more subversive ways. He keeps teaching spells she has banned. He offers comfort to students she punishes. In Order of the Phoenix, Rowling notes how Flitwick seemed to have shrunk even further during Umbridge's inspections, but his voice never wavered. This is the kind of resistance that goes unnoticed by those who crave spectacle, but it is no less heroic. The Charms classroom itself is a reflection of his spirit. It's always filled with floating objects, soft cushions for falls, and gentle laughter. Charms are often underrated in the wizarding world, seen as utility spells, lacking the drama of transfiguration or the brute force of defense against the dark arts. But without charms there would be no flying brooms, no levitating candles in the Great Hall, no Patronuses to drive away Dementors. Flitwick teaches students the very foundations of magical life, and he does so with joy. Hermione Granger, the brightest witch of her age, often praised Professor Flitwick's classes. "He makes everything sound so interesting," she once said, and he does. But it's not just the knowledge he imparts, it's the way he treats his students. Whether it's Neville Longbottom or Lavender Brown, Flitwick encourages everyone equally. He never mocks mistakes. He corrects with kindness. In a school that sometimes overwhelms young minds, he offers a safe space, and yet when the final battle comes, he does not shy away from violence. He fights, he protects, he holds the line. According to Rowling's notes, Flitwick was responsible for personally defeating at least one Death Eater during the Battle of Hogwarts. She never confirmed who it was, but fan theories suggest it may have been Antonin Dolohov, a wizard known for taking down formidable opponents. If true, it would be a fitting final duel for the diminutive Master of Charms. His duel style, reportedly based on quick reflexes and intricate spellwork, was a legacy of his competition years. Though we never see it in action on the page, one can imagine his wand a blur. Spells flying in rapid succession, his small frame darting between columns of the Great Hall. He would not yell, he would not boast, but his magic would speak for him. There's something tragic about Flitwick's lack of a deeper story. In a universe so rich in secondary characters, Tonks, Lupin, the Weasleys, it's unusual that a professor who taught every student and contributed to the final victory should remain so shadowed. Even Sybil Trelawney, often dismissed as a fraud, receives a moment of redemption, but Flitwick, his story, is still waiting to be told. Perhaps that's why fan fiction and fan art continue to imagine his adventures. In one popular piece, a young Flitwick is seen dueling in a European tournament, his goblin ancestry giving him an edge in underground circuits. In another, he's portrayed as a mentor to a new generation of Ravenclaws, passing down the forgotten histories of Hogwarts. The fandom has done what the books did not, given him life beyond the classroom. J.K. Rowling may have regretted not writing more about him, but in doing so, she gave readers a gift, a canvas upon which to imagine. Flitwick is proof that greatness doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers spells in empty halls, teaches students with patience, and fights evil without seeking glory. In the end, perhaps Professor Flitwick embodies what it means to be truly magical. Not in flash or fame, but in purpose, in quiet strength, in kindness backed by power. His story, still half told, lingers in the air like the final note of a charm, not loud but unforgettable. Number 22, neglect of secondary female characters. Of all the magical threads that J.K. Rowling wove into the vast tapestry of the Harry Potter universe, few shimmer with more untapped potential than the stories of her lesser-known female characters. We all know the brilliance of Hermione Granger, the commanding presence of Professor McGonagall, and the magnetic energy of Tonks. These women are unforgettable not just for their strength but for the depth of their identities. Yet they stand surrounded by a host of other female characters who flicker on the page like candlelight, briefly visible, hinting at more, only to vanish into the background of the boyhood-lived story. Take Parvati and Padma Patil, for instance. Twin sisters from Gryffindor and Ravenclaw, respectively, they are introduced with flair. Parvati, with her bold personality and connection to divination, often sits in Professor Trelawney's hazy, incense-scented classroom, seemingly attuned to the mystical arts. Padma, quieter, more measured, represents her house with poise. When the Yule Ball arrives in Goblet of Fire, they are the chosen dates of Harry and Ron, an opportunity ripe for development. But instead of allowing these girls to step forward, Rowling leaves them standing in the shadows of two uncomfortable boys, dismissed and bored. The Patil twins looked sulky and bored, Rowling writes, painting a picture that echoes through the series, promising characters left to linger on the margins. Lavender Brown was more than just Ron Weasley's brief and awkward girlfriend, but the story didn't quite allow her to be. She is shown to be passionate, emotional, perhaps a bit too romantic, and ultimately ridiculed for these traits. Her infatuation with Ron is played for laughs, and once their relationship ends, so too does her purpose in the narrative. Yet there was a world of possibility in Lavender. She was brave, she joined Dumbledore's army, and fought at the Battle of Hogwarts. Her name is last seen in a moment of ambiguous tragedy, injured and perhaps killed by Fenrir Greyback. Whether she lived or died was never made explicitly clear. Rowling once remarked, Lavender deserved more. Not just a more dignified fate, but a story. Then there's Penelope Clearwater, a Ravenclaw prefect and Percy Weasley's girlfriend. Her petrification in Chamber of Secrets is a key plot moment, yet after that she fades into silence. What kind of person wins Percy's affections? Ambitious, rule-driven, deeply loyal? Penelope might have provided insight into Percy's own complexities had she been granted space to grow, but she is rendered voiceless, literally during her petrification, and metaphorically in the narrative. We never hear her speak again. Madame Poppy Pomfrey, the matron of the Hogwarts Infirmary, is a woman of remarkable resilience. She heals Quidditch injuries, regrows shattered bones, and tends to students through every crisis. In Philosopher's Stone, she refuses to let Harry leave the hospital wing, declaring he's got to stay in bed. What he needs is rest. Her care is both professional and maternal, yet she remains a background figure, always there but never deeply seen. In a school where students constantly walk the line between life and death, surely the woman tasked with keeping them alive had stories worth telling. Even in the Order of the Phoenix, where strong women like Tonks shine, others remain dimly lit. Emmeline Vance, a member of the original Order, is mentioned in passing. Her name appears again only upon her death. Emmeline Vance was found murdered, Dumbledore tells the Order. Who was she? What had she sacrificed? We are not told. Rowling once confessed, I wanted Hogwarts to be full of different lives and fates, but not everyone got their due. Emmeline is a casualty not just of war, but of narrative omission. Fleur Delacour, introduced as the Beauxbatons champion in Goblet of Fire, is initially presented through Harry's dazzled, almost mocking lens. Her French accent, her beauty, and her confidence are played for humour. But Fleur proves her mettle during the Triwizard Tournament, and later during the Battle of Hogwarts. She is brave, loyal, and loving. Yet many readers still recall her as the Veela-like girl, obsessed with appearances. Why? Because that's the image the story reinforced again and again. Even her wedding to Bill Weasley, a moment that should have been transformative, is overshadowed by chaos. "She is very pretty," Molly Weasley says at first, her tone sceptical. It takes suffering and loss for her to see Fleur's strength. The reader, too, is left wondering why that strength wasn't shown earlier. Alicia Spinett, Katie Bell, and Angelina Johnson are three Gryffindor Quidditch players who are so much more than just teammates. Angelina, particularly, shines with leadership qualities. She takes over as captain of the team, managing the chaos of Gryffindor's passions. Yet her moments are fleeting. In Order of the Phoenix, she is one of the few students who stands against Dolores Umbridge. She helps form Dumbledore's army. She organizes practices. She's fierce and proud. Angelina was shaking with rage, Rowling writes, after yet another unjust punishment. Why was this firebrand not given more narrative space? Mafalda Hopkirk, an employee of the Ministry of Magic, is mostly known for her disembodied voice scolding Harry about underage magic. But even she holds potential. In Deathly Hallows, Hermione uses Polyjuice Potion to impersonate Hopkirk and infiltrate the Ministry. That means Mafalda was trusted enough to work closely with high-ranking officials, perhaps even helping enforce the oppressive Muggle-born Registration Commission. Was she complicit? Was she secretly opposed? We never know. She is a tool in the story, a voice, a name, but not a person. Millicent Bulstrode is another character with unmined depth. A Slytherin girl who duels Hermione in Chamber of Secrets. She's described as large and square, that's all we are told. But in a school filled with cliques and house rivalries, Millicent might have had her own reasons for her behavior, ambition, loyalty, or a sense of isolation. Instead, she becomes part of a comedic moment when Hermione accidentally uses a bit of her hair in Polyjuice Potion. "It was cat hair," Hermione exclaims, her voice horrified. And Millicent, forgotten, once the scene ends. Marietta Edgecombe, Cho Chang's friend, is remembered for betraying Dumbledore's army to Umbridge. Yet her motivations are more complicated. Her mother works for the Ministry. Her family might have been under threat. Rowling hints at this but does not explore it. Marietta becomes a plot device, her face covered in pustules as punishment from Hermione's enchantment. In a world where loyalty is a moral currency, Marietta is judged harshly but never understood. Even Cho Chang, Harry's first love, suffers from the limits placed upon her. Her grief for Cedric Diggory is genuine, her emotions raw. In Order of the Phoenix, Cho tries to find comfort in Harry, but the story treats her as a transitional figure, a foil to Ginny Weasley's eventual prominence. "She's crying again," Ron says dismissively. Cho is reduced to a stereotype of the tearful girl, but mourning is not weakness. Cho fought in the Battle of Hogwarts. She stood up when it mattered. Her story should not be a footnote to Harry's romantic journey. Madame Rosmerta, the innkeeper of the Three Broomsticks, is glamorous and savvy. She is kind to students and privy to much gossip. In Half-Blood Prince, she is cursed and used by Draco Malfoy to deliver poisoned mead and a cursed necklace. A powerful moment, yet the aftermath is silence. Rosmerta vanishes from the narrative. Was she traumatized? Did she recover? In a world of unforgivable curses, how did she live on? Miriam Strout, the healer from St. Mungo's, who mistakenly left a teapot where the Longbottoms could be attacked by Bode, is portrayed as scatterbrained. But she is part of a system trying to heal minds broken by war. Her small mistake has consequences, yet we never learn how it affected her. Strout could have embodied the failings of magical institutions in times of crisis, but she remains only a name in a minor tragedy. Andromeda Tonks, mother of Nymphadora and sister to Bellatrix and Narcissa, is perhaps the greatest missed opportunity of all. She is a woman who rejected the pure-blood mania of her family, who raised a daughter that would die for the cause of good. She loses her husband, daughter, and son-in-law in a matter of weeks, and yet she is barely seen. This woman, who ends up raising Teddy Lupin, is a war widow and a mother shattered by loss, but she does not speak. Her strength remains implied, never explored. In a rare moment of reflection, J.K. Rowling admitted, "I understand now that not everyone got the attention they deserved. Some characters deserved more light." This honesty opens the door for future stories, perhaps spin-offs or fan interpretations, to breathe life into these women. Because Hogwarts, for all its wonder, remains incomplete without them. Each of these characters, Parvati, Lavender, Millicent, Madame Pomfrey, Marietta, walked the same enchanted corridors as Harry. They endured the same battles, faced the same fears. They had dreams, fears, families, ambitions, and in a world so rich with magic, it is the absence of their stories that feels most like a spell left unfinished. Number 24, Crabbe and Goyle's unfinished arc. Of all the names that echo through the hallowed halls of Hogwarts, few linger with as much silent mystery as those of Vincent Crabbe and Gregory Goyle. From the earliest chapters of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, the two are introduced as shadows, bulky, slow-minded bodyguards trailing in the wake of Draco Malfoy's aristocratic sneer. They are fists more than voices, presence more than people. Their identities are shaped not by choices, but by allegiance. And yet, by the end of the saga, the silence around them deepens, thickens, and for one of them, it becomes eternal. Crabbe and Goyle appear like loyal gargoyles beside Draco, always present in the background of his misdeeds. In the Chamber of Secrets, when Draco mocks Hermione by calling her a mudblood, it's Crabbe and Goyle who laugh first. They do not question, they follow. Harry, disguised as Goyle via Polyjuice Potion, realizes this almost comically. Goyle doesn't speak unless prompted, and when he does, it's a grunt or an echo of Draco's sentiment. They are mirrors, dull, cracked ones, of their master's cruelty, but even mirrors crack under pressure. As the war looms, the lines between bully and killer blur. In Half-Blood Prince, Crabbe and Goyle take on new roles as lookouts for Draco's mission to repair the vanishing cabinet. They disguise themselves using Polyjuice Potion, a surprising upgrade in cunning. They're not as dumb as they look, Draco mutters in irritation. It's a rare moment of acknowledgement that behind the brutish exteriors, perhaps there is a flicker of cunning, of agency, and that flicker soon turns deadly. By the time of Deathly Hallows, the dynamic begins to unravel. The trio no longer walks as one. Draco is no longer the confident leader, but a conflicted young man caught between fear and expectation. Goyle and Crabbe, on the other hand, are less changed. They remain violent, dangerous even, but in a more desperate, untethered way. The turning point arrives in the Room of Requirement, the scene that seals Crabbe's fate and casts Goyle into the abyss of obscurity. During the battle inside the magically shifting room, Crabbe unleashes fiend fire, a cursed fire so uncontrollable that even Death Eaters hesitate to use it. It is an act of rage and madness. "Are you crazy?" Draco shouts, but Crabbe isn't listening. This isn't bullying in a corridor anymore. This is war. Harry watches the flames twist into monstrous shapes, serpents, chimeras, a fiery hell let loose. The room was full of fire, and the fire was alive. It was a gigantic, murderous beast lunging toward them, Rowling writes. In this inferno, Crabbe dies, consumed by his own unleashed destruction. It is a tragic, final note to a character who was never given a song. Crabbe doesn't get a redemption arc. He doesn't hesitate, doesn't reflect. His death is abrupt, cruel, and above all, unceremonious. No teacher or friend mourns him. No line in the epilogue mentions his name. He is a casualty of the fire he created, both literally and narratively. And what of Goyle? He survives, pulled to safety by Harry and Ron in a moment of grim necessity. Even if we hate them, we're not like them, Ron mutters as they drag the unconscious boy out. Goyle is silent during the escape, his usual brutish demeanor burned away, replaced with something closer to blankness. After that, he vanishes from the story. He is not mentioned at the Battle of Hogwarts. He is not listed among the arrested, the dead, or even the redeemed. Rowling later admitted in an interview that she once considered giving one of the two a redemption arc. Possibly Goyle. I had this idea, she said, that maybe Goyle, after seeing the death of Crabbe, might realize the cost of blind loyalty, but I just didn't find the dramatic space. That phrase, didn't find the dramatic space, has since haunted fans who hoped for more. Because in a saga where even characters like Dudley Dursley are given moments of grace, Goyle's complete disappearance feels not like a resolution, but an omission. What makes this absence feel even heavier is the way other minor characters are handled with nuance. Take Neville Longbottom, once as forgettable as Crabbe and Goyle. Over 7 books he grows into a symbol of courage. Even Seamus Finnegan, known mostly for blowing things up in class, fights bravely at Hogwarts, but Goyle, who witnessed the war from within, who saw his best friend burn alive, is given no moment of reckoning, no line, no future. Some fans have taken it upon themselves to imagine what might have been. Fan fiction sites are filled with theories that Goyle joined the Aurors, racked with guilt, that he disappeared into the Muggle world, ashamed of his past, that he took care of Crabbe's mother in secret. These stories try to fill the void left by canon. They attempt to answer the question, what happens to a follower when there's no one left to follow? The tragedy of Crabbe and Goyle is not just their end, but their beginning. They were introduced as goons, given no chance to grow beyond that. Their Hogwarts years were reduced to sneers, thumps, and standing guard while Draco talked. In a world where even Peter Pettigrew gets a complex arc, betrayal, guilt, death, the flatness of Crabbe and Goyle feels stark. Perhaps it was a narrative choice. Not everyone gets redemption, but in a story about love, choice and change, their fate feels jarringly hollow. And yet, their final moment is one of the most visually striking in the entire series. The image of the Fiendfire consuming the Room of Requirement is unforgettable. The beast was unstoppable, its flames crackling and roaring like 1,000 dragons. Crabbe, who could barely cast a proper spell in earlier books, had now unleashed something ancient and apocalyptic. It was his only moment of power, and it destroyed him. It also nearly killed Draco, Goyle, Ron, and Hermione. In a cruel twist, Crabbe almost succeeded in doing something he'd never managed before, defeating Harry Potter, not through planning, but through raw, reckless destruction. In that moment, the line between villain and victim blurs. Crabbe is not evil, he's lost, angry, misled, and the magic he chose reflects that. The silence after his death is deafening. No funeral, no one mentions his family, no teacher reflects on what led a student to master a forbidden curse. Even Draco, who once called them his friends, never speaks of Crabbe again. It is as though he never existed. And perhaps that's the most painful part, that in a story full of memory and legacy, Crabbe's is reduced to ashes. Goyle's fate, meanwhile, has become a symbol of narrative absence. His disappearance is discussed on forums, in essays, in podcasts. Where is Goyle now is not a question with a canonical answer, and perhaps it never will be. Rowling once said, "I missed the chance." And indeed, that missed chance feels like a lost echo from the dungeons of Slytherin, a ghost not of evil, but of neglect. What makes this more poignant is the thematic core of the series itself, that people can change. Severus Snape, Regulus Black, Percy Weasley, even Creature, the house elf. Redemption is a thread that runs through every book, but Crabbe and Goyle were never offered that thread. They were the punchline to a darker joke that some are too stupid to be saved, but is that fair? There's a quote from Order of the Phoenix that sticks. "Indifference and neglect often do much more damage than outright dislike." Dumbledore said that, and while he was speaking of Harry's treatment by the Dursleys, it echoes eerily when applied to Crabbe and Goyle. They were never truly hated, they were ignored. And in the end, that neglect consumed one in fire and left the other in silence. Would it have changed the story if Goyle had turned? If he had, in the final battle, shielded a student or refused to fight? Probably not the plot, but the meaning, yes. It would have whispered that even the faceless can find themselves, that even the quietest can make a noise that matters. Instead, his silence echoes, a void in the narrative tapestry. And maybe that's why fans still talk about them, because in a world so carefully built, their fates feel like cracks in the castle walls. Crabbe died without dignity. Goyle lived without a future. Together, they remind us that not every character is granted growth, and that every story has its ghosts. When the Room of Requirement burned, it didn't just consume books and cursed objects, it burned away a path not taken. It incinerated a possible redemption, a reflection, a resolution. In the roar of that cursed fire, we lost a minor character who might have mattered, and another who might have changed. Crabbe and Goyle remain footnotes, but footnotes tell us what the main text does not. They whisper of decisions not made, scenes not written, and humanity lost to the margins. Perhaps they were never meant to be heroes, but they were boys once, 11 years old on their first train to Hogwarts, laughing too loudly, following someone stronger, hoping to belong. Now one lies in ash, and the other nowhere at all. Number 25, Magical Medicine and the Cost of War. Madame Pomfrey was a miracle worker. That much was clear from the very first book, when Harry awoke in the hospital wing after his near-death experience at the hands of Professor Quirrell. Bones could be regrown overnight with a gulp of Skelegro. Burns could vanish within hours. Venom could be neutralized with a properly brewed potion. The world of wizarding medicine was dazzlingly efficient, almost too efficient. There were few long recoveries and fewer lingering scars. Yet war leaves marks. And for all its talk of dark times, Harry Potter rarely paused to truly show us the wounded. Take George Weasley, for instance. The night of the Battle of the Seven Potters, a curse from Severus Snape, meant for another, struck him. "Saint-like," George murmured. "You see, I'm holy, Fred, get it?" The humour was classic Weasley. But what followed? A single night in the Burrows' living room, a nod to his bandaged head, and then George resumed life as if nothing had changed. In the real world, even a magical one, losing an ear should bring balance issues, phantom pain, psychological impact. Instead, George becomes a symbol of resilience, untouched by trauma. Rowling herself later reflected on this. In a post-series interview, she admitted, "I think I did too little to explore how war damages people. George's loss. I should have given it more emotional weight. I wish I'd shown more lasting consequences. PTSD, grief, survivor's guilt, those things don't vanish with a potion." This honesty resonated with many fans who had served in wars or suffered trauma. They understood that even in fantasy, scars matter. The case of Bill Weasley was another strange omission. Mauled by Fenrir Greyback, the savage werewolf, Bill was described as having deep gashes across his face, and that his appearance would forever be altered. Fleur, ever loyal, declared, "I am good-looking enough for both of us." It was a beautiful moment, but one rarely revisited. We never saw Bill struggle with his new appearance, never saw society's reaction to the scars or his new cravings for raw meat. The trauma faded into the background like a spell that had worn off. Remus Lupin, on the other hand, was someone Rowling allowed to carry visible burdens. His werewolf curse isolated him, made employment nearly impossible, drove him into self-hatred. But even Lupin's condition was curable for a time, thanks to Professor Snape's perfected wolfsbane potion. The underlying message seemed to be that in the wizarding world, medicine had the power to erase discomfort. You could tame the beast, heal the wound, silence the pain, but could you really? Think of Neville Longbottom's parents. Tortured into madness by Bellatrix Lestrange, they lived in St. Mungo's, whispering nonsense and offering gum wrappers to their son. "He doesn't really recognize me," Neville said dully. The hospital could not fix what had been broken. For all its potions and wards, magical medicine had no cure for Cruciatus-induced madness. That rare depiction of long-term trauma was haunting, and it stood nearly alone. In St. Mungo's we glimpsed other eerie patients, a wizard cursed to grow tentacles from his face, a woman whose head emitted steam. Gilderoy Lockhart, grinning with empty eyes, scribbling autograph after autograph, his mind shattered by his own backfiring spell. He's a lot better than he was, at least he can do joined-up writing now. And yet, these cases were presented almost comically, a gallery of curiosities. The pain, the sorrow, the families waiting, those were shadows on the page. Harry himself bore physical scars. The lightning bolt on his forehead was the most famous in wizarding history, but beyond the symbol, what was the pain? We know the scar hurt when Voldemort was near. We know it bled during visions. But what of headaches? What of trauma growing up with that mark, seen as the boy who lived before he even spoke? The scar had not pained Harry for 19 years. All was well. It's a neat bow. Too neat. What of mental scars? When Sirius Black fell through the veil at the Department of Mysteries, Harry screamed. He waited for Sirius to reappear. He waited too long. The death struck deep. "He's not coming back, Harry." Dumbledore, for the first time, admitted he had erred. "I should have told you years ago." But Harry was a boy. He broke things in Dumbledore's office. He cried. Then within pages the story rolled forward. No mention of therapy, no visible processing. And this pattern repeated. Dobby's death, Fred's death, Tonks and Lupin, Colin Creevey, Lavender Brown. The weight was there, but rarely explored. One of the most potent lines in the series came from Dumbledore himself. "Do not pity the dead, Harry. Pity the living, and above all, those who live without love." But living without love, living with grief, is its own kind of death. Harry watched his friends fall. He watched Cedric Diggory die just inches away. He duelled Voldemort as a child. He died, briefly, himself. And yet we are told all was well. There's a line in Order of the Phoenix, after Harry sees the Thestrals, which sums up his state of mind. "You're just as sane as I am," Luna Lovegood says gently. It's a strange comfort. Harry begins to sense he's changed. The world is different now, but that awareness is fleeting. There is no journey through healing, no struggle with recurring nightmares, no shaking hands, no insomnia, no guilt. And yet fan fiction is brimming with it. Thousands of writers took to online platforms to tell the stories Rowling didn't. Harry waking up screaming in the middle of the night, Ron breaking down at Fred's grave, Hermione losing herself in books to escape the faces of the fallen. These narratives filled the void because readers knew instinctively that trauma doesn't vanish with victory, that scars don't vanish when the war ends. Perhaps the most shocking oversight is the lack of veteran culture in wizarding society. Where are the war memorials, the disabled witches and wizards, the support networks? Surely not everyone made it through the war intact. Where are the auras with missing limbs, the healers suffering burnout? Even Kingsley Shacklebolt, the new Minister for Magic, seems untouched. A symbol of strength, certainly, but also a missed opportunity to explore leadership forged in pain. There's a quiet moment in The Half-Blood Prince when Dumbledore shows Harry the cave where Voldemort hid his Horcrux. After they return, Dumbledore is weak, nearly dying. "Don't say wiser, Harry. It makes you sound a bit conceited." It's the only time we see the great wizard falter so deeply. But again, the scene is short. The weight, immense though it is, quickly passes. Some characters are changed. Percy Weasley, after Fred's death, weeps openly. He abandons his ministry job, but this arc is barely explored. One moment he's embracing Fred's body. The next, he's in the background, a reformed brother. The emotional bridge between those two moments is missing. What thoughts filled his nights? What words did he say to his parents? We're never told. The absence of grief isn't just a narrative oversight. It's a philosophical statement. By glossing over the scars, the book suggests that magic can fix anything, but the one thing it never could was loss. And loss, in the Harry Potter series, is everywhere. Parents, siblings, mentors, friends, all gone. The world changes, and yet the people don't carry that change on their skin or in their souls. Not visibly. Even Draco Malfoy, who watched his family unravel under Voldemort's reign, who failed to kill Dumbledore and nearly died at the hands of fiendfire, he appears, years later, at King's Cross Station, a calm father, seeing off his son. No mention of nightmares, no lingering terror, no bitterness. Is this healing or erasure? And yet the potential was there. Rowling laid the groundwork, the broken wands, the cursed hands, the silent looks between survivors. But the aftermath of war was always off stage, a chapter not written. In that vacuum, the fans built their own hospitals, their own therapies, their own stories. It is perhaps in Neville Longbottom that we see the closest thing to real transformation. A shy, bullied boy who becomes a hero. But even his arc skips the struggle. One day he's clumsy, the next he's beheading Nagini with the sword of Gryffindor. It's satisfying, yes, but what sleepless nights preceded it? What did he feel when he saw his parents, time after time, not recognizing him? The answer lies between the lines. In one version of this story, one not told, we imagine Ginny waking up from nightmares of the Chamber of Secrets, or Seamus Finnegan trembling each time someone lit a fire, or McGonagall holding back tears when she walks the ruined halls of Hogwarts. These stories exist. They simply weren't written in ink. Perhaps that's what Rowling meant, years later, when she said, "I should have shown more scars." Because war, even in a magical world, should never feel too clean.